Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And a very happy unbirthday to the Queen.
It's the Queen's fake birthday. It's her birthday again. She's 94 all over again, with a little mini Trooping the Colour to celebrate.
It's very stripped back. This is Trooping Unplugged. And rather than being held in London, it's in the grounds of Windsor Castle.
In the quadrangle.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, the quadrangle. Normally it would be in London, they'd be going up and down Horse Guards Parade. There'd be many horses, many guards. There would be a parade with family members in carriages and a lot of people, like us last year, hanging around looking.
We did an episode about it, in case you haven't heard it already. It's called 93 Candles, if you wanted to go back and get our on-the-ground report of what it was like. Today we were watching it on the couch.
Yeah, it was quite surreal, I thought. It was just the Queen sitting on like a big chair, watching. As my favourite bit was when the Welsh Guardsmen, who were the performing soldiers, did kind of like their equivalent of donuts, where they were like spinning round and round, and she loved that bit.
Yeah, she was almost like jiving a little bit. I mean, as much as you can. Apparently that little tented area was like specially set up just for her with one seat because
nobody else
her aides aren't allowed to sit down.
And Philip wasn't going to come out with her.
I know, and I was reading royal reporters and stuff saying like maybe some of the other members of the family would come and watch from a distance, or maybe you might even see Prince Phillip watching out the window, but he couldn't be arsed to get out of bed. And
I'd be terrified if you saw Prince Philip's face in the window.
I think that actually would have been a real bolster for the British people.
Oh,
Tom.
yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
They love that. You love that. You, British person. It ended with them playing God Save the Queen.
Of course.
As they got to have their very special moment, the guards making eye contact with the Queen. That was a very special moment for all of them, as the BBC commentator couldn't stop telling us.
And yes, if you're really lucky, you'll catch the twinkle in Her Majesty's eye.
While that was going on, there were a group of alt-right protesters gathering in central London and tuning up their own voices to sing God Save the Queen as they defended statues such as the statue of Winston Churchill, which
has been put in a giant box.
Yeah, for safekeeping. I mean, don't look at the footage because it's very upsetting, but it's a lot of, you know, really pink-faced white guys, lots of them with their tops off, doing Nazi salutes, and then they all start singing God Save the Queen. They sang Rule Britannia. This was British nationalism out in full force, and I feel like it would be appropriate at this time for a member of the royal family, such as the Queen, to say that they do not support the views of the people who were singing to her on her birthday.
Yeah. In
between Nazi salutes.
It makes me feel like in this country we have two kinds of statues. We have racist ones, and then we have these like World War II, we defeated the Nazis statues. And I'm sorry, but these guys just can't tell the difference between them. Like, the whole thing, I mean, you shouldn't be expecting any kind of coherence from these kind of hateful racists. But the whole thing was just like, I had my head in my hands thinking about the state of this country at the moment.
And then you saw like pictures of a guy taking a piss next to one of the statues. Like, that really shows you how much respect they have for them. But we should say this protest was initially set up as a counter-protest to a Black Lives Matter protest that was due to go ahead in central London today. But the Black Lives Matter movement decided to call it off, and instead they did local protests outside of central London. But these Nazis and alt-right guys showed up anyway.
Yeah.
The statue defenders, as they were being called. Anyway, the Queen's silence is deafening.
Yeah.
We had been talking before the lockdown about trooping, and we had been wondering, would Harry and Meghan come back to join the parade? Would they be on the balcony? But mostly we were wondering what's going to go on with Prince Andrew.
Yeah, well, we felt like all eyes were going to be on this event, not only because of the potential of Harry and Meghan being there, but like Andrew obviously having had such a bombshell year in terms of his status in the royal family. We had been saying I'm sure the Queen would do anything she could to have him there because she loves him so much. She would hate to make him sit outside in the cold or not be allowed on the balcony or whatever. But it turns out she's managed to dodge that by having this stripped back trooping, and she's found another way to take care of him.
Yeah, we heard from a report in The Sun that Andrew has been allowed to keep his taxpayer-funded bodyguards, which allegedly cost £300,000 a year.
Oh my God.
In our taxes.
Our money.
After the Queen intervened. So The Sun says that Andrew was set to lose his 3 bodyguards following a Home Office cost-cutting review that would also have affected Princess Anne, Prince Edward, Sophie Wessex and their families. But a royal source said the Queen's children all lobbied her, but Andrew has been the most persuasive. She's made it clear that she was not happy with the proposal. It has been stopped and will be reviewed over the next few weeks.
If that outcome is anything other than if the Queen feels so fucking strongly about this she can pay for it herself, I will be even more outraged than I clearly already am.
I think it's interesting that the language they use, that the report says it happened after Andrew complained, which I feel like pins all the blame on Andrew rather than it being the conscious decision of the Queen to intervene.
Yeah.
And, that's her move. And the fact that she did that and can do that is a reminder of how powerful she is and the influence she has over authorities such as the police.
Well, exactly. And I think you get a lot of people who try to kind of placate anti-monarchists over here by saying guys, she doesn't really have any power. Don't get so worked up about it. She brings a lot of money in and she doesn't really do anything. But she can tell the government how to spend our money and she can, like you say, intervene in police matters.
As well as that, we didn't really hear much about this story after it was initially reported, but I'm sure listening to this, you'll be well aware of the ongoing saga of Meghan and Harry's security and the almost gleeful reporting of who was going to be paying for it and whether they'd even be able to pay for it at all and if they would be exposed to various risks.
Yeah, the giddiness with which people seem to want this young family to be exposed to all kinds of danger.
And people were so outraged about that, even seeing people outraged that Prince Charles would privately pay for Harry and Meghan's security.
Yeah.
When the Queen is letting us pay for fucking Prince Andrew to sit around on his arse all day in Royal Lodge.
Are you serious? Pay for what? Standing there?
Some of you have said to us, when is Andrew going to have to pay back the $7.5 million that was spent on renovating his home in Windsor Royal Lodge? But from what we can tell, and please do let us know if we're getting this wrong, the money that was spent, the $7.5 million, was private funds, not taxpayer funds, that the way that the money that was spent on Frogmore House and also on Kate and Will's apartment in Kensington Palace, those were taxpayer funds, whereas in this instance it was mummies, bank of mummy, basically.
So this is, just to clarify, money from British people and presumably nations all around the world that she stole rather than collected as taxes. But,
But he also did receive a gifted property, as Frogmore House was for Harry and Meghan and the Kensington Palace apartment was for Kate and Will, and he sold that for £15 million.
He is that person where you give them a present and then later that afternoon you see them on eBay looking up how much they can get for it.
Speaking of money, got some more money drama from Andrew, a follow-up. We've been talking a few weeks ago about how his charity, the Prince Andrew Charitable Trust, was being investigated over the payment of £355,000 to a former trustee, Andrew's long-standing private secretary, Amanda Thirsk. Now we hear that the trust will be wound up after a ruling by the Charity Commission that it broke the law. The Director of Operations of the Charity Commission said, by allowing the payment of a trustee via its subsidiaries, the Prince Andrew Charitable Trust breached charity law, and by insufficiently managing the resulting conflict of interest from this payment, the trustees did not demonstrate the behaviour expected of them. Pretty strong words.
This all kind of came up after the charity reported to the Commission the potential damage to its reputation from the Newsnight controversy. So even the people that work for Andrew, I mean, I imagine especially the people that have to work with Andrew, are super fed up with him. And honestly, I think that one of the best things that's going to come out of this is after the trust is all wound up and doesn't exist anymore, we'll never ever have to hear the phrase Prince Andrew's charitable body.
The biggest development of the week, though, in relation to Prince Andrew, because this was a big week for Andrew news, which Tom and I were delighted about. So another report from The Sun, this time revealing that the US Department of Justice has bypassed Buckingham Palace in seeking an interview with Prince Andrew over the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, and has instead filed a mutual legal assistance request, or an MLA request, to the Home Office demanding an interview with Andrew.
These MLA requests are normally only used in criminal cases under a legal treaty with the UK. So this formally classifies Andrew as being caught up in a criminal investigation.
The reason this is so dramatic is, well, one, these MLA requests are usually kept secret, so we don't generally hear about them. But also, it means that Andrew, who we should note categorically denies any wrongdoing, could be forced to appear in court as a witness. So it's putting pressure on Andrew to give evidence, but also putting a lot of pressure on the UK government to assist. We should note, though, it would be a court in the UK. He won't be extradited. And we even heard William Barr, the US Attorney General, talking about this week. He told Fox News of Andrew, "I don't think it's a question of handing him over. I think it's just a question of having him provide some evidence." But that's kind of downplaying a little bit, because it's actually pretty major.
Yeah.
And Andrew was majorly pissed off about it.
According to the BBC, he was bitterly unhappy about the leaking of this MLA request, and the source described it as an extraordinary breach of confidentiality. I mean, this is, doesn't surprise me at all that he just wants everything kept under wraps, nothing to get out. I mean, this is a man who's so stupid that he doesn't realise that his entire reputation is forever destroyed by what's happened over the last few months. And the longer
he draws this out, the worse it's going to be. Just to explain, the whole thing about the MLA was quite confusing to me, but from what I've read, if this MLA request is granted, US prosecutors would have two options. So the first option, which I guess is what the best they can hope for, the best that Andrew can hope for, and is typically only used for witnesses to crimes, would see Andrew being asked to voluntarily attend an interview and give a signed statement, and it would not be under oath. But the second option is the more intense one, and this would see Andrew asked to attend the City of Westminster Magistrates Court in London to provide oral or written evidence on oath, and if he refused, he could be forced to attend in person by summons, with Department of Justice lawyers able to quiz him about anything.
And it should be noted that, unlike the Queen, Andrew doesn't hold sovereign immunity from prosecution, so this can all happen to him.
It would, though, be held in camera, which means privately, so there'd be no press there, no members of the public would be allowed to go in, and he would have the right to plead the fifth by staying silent to avoid self-incrimination, which those of you who watched the Filthy Rich documentary on Netflix about Jeffrey Epstein will have seen. That's how Epstein responded to every question when he was in court, and how absolutely appalling it was seeing him answer to the most disgusting kinds of questions about what he had done. And as it did with Epstein, when you hear someone do that in response to those kinds of questions, you wonder, what are they hiding?
Yeah. I feel like he likes the sound of his own voice too much to ever do that. So I imagine that he's going to run his mouth off and say something stupid. By which I mean true.
Speaking of running his mouth off, he did release a very bratty statement this week through his legal team, which said, "The Duke of York has on at least 3 occasions this year offered his assistance as a witness to the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, the Department of Justice has reacted to the first 2 offers by breaching their own confidentiality rules and claiming that the Duke has offered zero cooperation. In doing so, they are perhaps seeking publicity rather than accepting the assistance offered." And then, this fucking blew my head off. "Far from our client acting above the law, as has been implied by press briefings in the US, he is being treated by a lower standard than might reasonably be expected for any other citizen." Jesus Christ.
For a member of the royal family to say that at any time is like fucking ridiculous. But right now, when there's protests going on across the US, across the world about the way black citizens are treated by police.
I know, like seeing, you know, justice for George Floyd, justice for Breonna Taylor, and Andrew's like, justice for Andrew. Yeah. Like, it's absolutely tone deaf, the most tone deaf you can get, really. Yeah. Just another point, the point about, oh, they're perhaps seeking publicity. We had heard them make this claim before in regards to Epstein's victims, when his legal team had previously alleged that the victims were seeking publicity after their lawyers spoke out about Andrew and suggested that the victims wanted to make a name for themselves by getting into some kind of public spat with Andrew. But like, those are civil lawsuits, which is very different, and attacking those civil attorneys is very different from going after a fucking federal prosecutor.
Yeah.
Which is what he's doing here.
Yeah, it sounds like the family wasn't too happy about it either. The Sunday Times reported that the reaction to Andrew's statement inside the palace was very chilly, with a source saying palace officials were furious that he did what he did because it overshadowed the Duke of Edinburgh's 99th birthday on Wednesday, which was supposed to be a positive moment for the monarchy.
That makes sense, because it seemed like everybody was all geared up for this birthday, and then Andrew, like, fucking charges in with this awful statement, and that's all anybody can talk about.
Yeah.
The source also said, the idea that the Queen will simply indulge Prince Andrew is wide of the mark. Her patience has been wearing thin for a long time. She had resisted the slimming down of the monarchy, but it's fair to say she is not now standing in the way of that in her lifetime. And to illustrate that, the Sunday Times notes that although the Queen has continued to ride her horse or pony regularly at Windsor, it is understood she has not seen Andrew, who lives very close at Royal Lodge, and that she opts instead to go for socially distanced rides with her head groom, Terry Pendry.
Who we're going to talk about more later.
So she's really cutting him off if she's not doing the, like we talked before about how she did that, like, show of support by doing the horse ride photos with him.
But, like, unsurprisingly, he is totally incapable of reading the room, because even after, like, the stuff about his statement, it all going down so badly, he still thinks he can have a comeback. Apparently, it is still his intention to resume a public role, according to a source who's close to him, who was talking to the Sunday Times, who said, he knows he has to resolve the noise around the matter. The Duke sees the situation now as a working sabbatical from his duties. He's very conscious of the impact it's had on the reputation of the royal family, his own family, and the country. So, what exactly is he doing to try and save the reputation of his family and the country?
Do we buy this thing that the Queen is, her patience is wearing thin and she's not actually going to be protecting him or sticking up for him as much as possible? Like, I don't, given we just heard that she intervened to make sure that he got to keep his bodyguards.
Yeah, I don't believe it either. It sounds to me more like a statement that would be put out by people at the palace who know how bad this all looks. And that the more he does, the harder it is to distance the Queen from it. And
Andrew's great idea to try and rehab the family's reputation, and indeed the country's reputation, if this source is to be believed, is by conceding that his failure to apologise to Jeffrey Epstein's victims on his Newsnight interview was a source of regret.
Which is, you know, unlike his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, which he said he didn't regret. But also, this should be what he regrets. This whole fucking statement of unfair treatment is ridiculous. And, you know, he should realise that now, not in a few fucking months' time.
It's just like the fucking cheek of him, the fucking ignorance of him, like the gall of him. He's just shameless in how he's speaking about this at a time when, like, black people all around the world are protesting over injustice and unjust treatment by the police, and Andrew thinks he has a fucking leg to stand on here.
It's disgusting.
And I love that the US attorney who he's kind of referring to in this statement, Jeffrey Berman, just came fired back saying, Prince Andrew yet again sought to falsely portray himself to the public as eager and willing to cooperate with an ongoing federal criminal investigation into sex trafficking and related offences committed by Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. Giving you the full whack there. Yeah. Even though the Prince has not given an interview to federal authorities, has repeatedly declined our request to schedule such an interview, and nearly 4 months ago informed us unequivocally through the very same council who issued today's release that he would not come in for such an interview. If Prince Andrew is in fact serious about cooperating with the ongoing federal investigation, our doors remain open and we await word of when we should expect him. Sensational.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great couple of weeks for people calling out the royal family as liars and standing by their guns.
Yeah, just publicly he's saying falsities here.
Yeah.
Andrew's lawyers declined to comment further on this, but a source told the BBC, "This is the third time Berman has breached his own confidentiality rules, further diminishing our trust in the Department of Justice's willingness to play a straight bat. It's frankly bewildering."
I love the cricket reference.
I know, we've heard them make these references to crooked bats, like, multiple times. I did find it quite illuminating. The Times had a quote from Ben Keith, a barrister specialising in extradition, who said that it seems the main issue is that the US want an interview, perhaps fishing for more information, whereas Prince Andrew wants to answer in writing. So he's kind of shying away from doing a face-to-face.
Ooh, does that mean that he might have actually learnt a lesson? They know that if they get him talking, he'll just run his mouth off, I think.
On a separate note, Lainey Gossip pointed out that Andrew is the only royal for whom the bells rang out at Westminster Abbey this year for their birthday, because we obviously had the Queen's birthday and Prince Philip's birthday this week. Both of them were in lockdown and they both asked...
No bells, please.
Yes, they both requested that there would not be any bells this year, so we just got Andrew.
Yeah. Oh, it just really plays into that, like, spoiled toddler look of his.
But instead of the birthday bells, we did get a very strange new photo to mark Philip's 99th birthday this week.
I'd prefer to describe it as like a photo illustration or perhaps like a collage. This was really perplexing. It showed, or it appeared to show, the Queen and Philip standing next to each other but not touching in the quadrangle at Windsor Castle. I don't believe that photo was ever taken.
As you guys know, Tom is the Photoshop expert. And immediately he was zooming in on all of these Photoshop fails.
There were all these things, like, I really felt like the lighting on their faces was not indicative of people who were outside. I felt like this was an indoor photo and they'd been cut out of it and pasted onto an outdoor background. And I also, just the fact that they weren't touching in the photo just made my conspiracy theory brain go like, these are even two different photos. Like, they're each from different photos. Like, they aren't together.
I do think, though, it was pretty obvious that her hands had been photoshopped. Even if you... Now, some of you guys have disagreed with us and said you don't think this photo is edited at all. But I think, you know, even the most untrained eye would have questions about the hands in this photo. And you may remember when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's Christmas card came out last year and some randomer edited it heavily and made Meghan's face really sharp and made her bigger than Harry and all kinds of very obvious edits on it.
Yeah.
And tabloids assigned their photo teams, I think the Daily Mail did like a forensic analysis on every aspect of the Photoshop version that had been photoshopped rather than the original that had been shared by the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, which they blatantly ignored. And this one comes out on the Queen's official social media channels with a very clear instance of Photoshop on the hands, and we hear nothing about it. The only place I did see, I mean, some of the like smaller bloggy ones, like international blogs, did pieces on it, but I only saw in the Daily Express, the website did a piece that lashed out at Prince Philip trolls who claimed that it was edited, and it included a line that Buckingham Palace had declined to comment on this.
I mean, I think the main thing is the hands look photoshopped, but also the shadows underneath them are like really like defined and short, and that kind of shadow is very, very rare to get from the sun. Like, when you're outside, the light is much more universal, so you get much softer looking shadows, which is why it makes me think that that photo is from inside.
I mean, we'll never know for sure. This is just our own speculation. But we also asked our followers on Instagram what they thought about it, and many of you worried that maybe the Queen wasn't doing so well, that her hands may have shown signs of bruising or mottling or marks from a drip or something like that, and that the photo had been edited to fend off any speculation about her health. Because you might remember there was that photo of her with like Queen Rania of Jordan where she had a big bruise on her hand, and people, like the whole world was like, oh my god, what's going on with the Queen?
Yeah.
So maybe they thought that this was like a better way to downplay that by possibly editing the hands.
I think if it was that kind of thought through, they would have put her in gloves, like if she had,
as they did today for dripping the colour.
Yeah. We'll never know, like you say. And the Palace PR machine has been in overdrive this week.
Yeah, last weekend the Sunday Times magazine had a cover story on Sophie Wessex that praised her as Buckingham Palace's safest pair of hands.
Least photoshopped pair of hands.
And featured photos of her in what was very confidently described as the Indian room of Bagshot Park, her vast estate, which has 57 rooms. I had no idea she lived in a house that big.
I mean, and maybe you could choose, like, not the Indian room.
Or maybe just don't tell them it's called the Indian room.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to be... I mean, we want to be pointing at the colonial past of the royal family, but I don't think they want to be drawing attention to it.
Then we saw Prince Charles doing an interview on Sky News where he said that he was lucky to have got away with it quite lightly in regards to coronavirus. And he also said he missed his daddy, that he hadn't seen him in quite a long time, but that...
I've been doing the FaceTime.
And really just wants to give people a hug. So watch out, President Macron, who Charles will be meeting next week.
Will and Kate also took a break from talking about the Tatler story and revealed that they were secretly volunteering.
Yeah, not the secret anymore, is it?
Yeah. Handy timing.
And Kate did a whole load more Zoom calls, as well as a little video for her Hold Still photography project, which is going to be wrapping up soon. And, you know, speaking of Zoom, even the Queen was Zooming this week. The Queen's first public video call with Princess Anne to mark Carers Week. It showed her thanking unpaid caregivers. And she said, "Interesting listening to all your tales and stories."
A masterpiece of the Queen's banal comments.
Oh, you love this one.
This was such a weird story. Okay, so the Queen's stud groom, Terry Pendry, wrote an exclusive piece for your favourite magazine, Horse and Hound, highlighting 8 special horses Her Majesty and her family have loved riding and watching.
Any horses in that one? Or hounds, for that matter. Our readers are equally intrigued by both species.
And then John Warren, who's the Queen's bloodstock and racing advisor, which is fucking creepy title,
Yeah.
Bloodstock. But he shared 5 of her most memorable racehorses.
People loved this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they got...
Not us, but people.
They got such a good reaction to that picture of her on the horse, so they were like...
On the pony.
The pony. But, well, then they were like, well, how do we step it up? We go to fully grown horses. I know ponies aren't just baby horses. I know, okay.
It really, though, it showed me that they are very conscious of the fact that they're all working behind closed doors now and that they've got to rely on, like, shitty quality video calls, and the royal family as a whole are desperate to maintain their relevance. The Telegraph had a long read on the future of the Queen, and in it the author Andrew Morton, who you may know from writing the famous Diana book, told the Telegraph that he believes the Queen won't be able to carry out royal engagements for months, if not years. How can she carry out investitures, meet ambassadors, do walkabouts and visit places without meeting people at close range? If she gets the bug, it could be fatal and would put Prince Philip at risk as well. The brutal truth is that her reign is effectively over. COVID-19 has done more damage to the monarchy than Oliver Cromwell. Corona has practically put Charles on the throne.
That's pretty strong words.
I know. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I am inclined to agree.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel like it's refocused the work that she does, because I think she's not going to be meeting, or she hasn't been meeting other world leaders or these kind of diplomatic events that would be a lot of what we see of the Queen in the kind of recent years. And now her role seems more videos that will be broadcast inside our homes and talking to the people in Britain. So I think
cuddly granny mode.
Yeah. But like the strongest granny you've ever known.
The writer of this piece in the Telegraph, Camilla Tominey, the royal correspondent for the paper, very plainly disagrees with that view, though. She says, it's not as if the Queen's role has been diminished during the outbreak. In fact, it has arguably been enhanced and needed more than ever.
She continued that if lockdown has demonstrated anything, then it is the respect Her Majesty still commands after nearly 7 decades on the throne, reaffirming her role as mother of the nation and a beacon of stability and continuity.
Do you feel like she's your mummy?
I just think that it's that kind of attitude that goes some way to upholding the myth of the monarchy. Like, I much more agree with Andrew Morton and this reduced role. I don't feel that she's kind of like stronger than ever.
I know. And I think this idea of her being a beacon of stability and continuity is really about her as a symbol more than as somebody who actually does any work. Like, it's really just the sight of the Queen in her like Queen uniform saying these sort of bland platitudes that people just love. And the fact that she's lived for so long and lived through so much is what people really respond to, more than her going to visit like a factory or something.
Yeah. And you've got to kind of wonder if that kind of work really is important enough for her to have a say in police budgets and taxpayer funds and things, because it doesn't add up to me.
But it also makes me think, like, is it really worth it, her going back out to do these in-person meetings and having garden parties and stuff with tons of people? Does the benefit really outweigh the risk there? No,
I mean, I honestly, I think that the only reason they're not retiring her is because they think if you retire king or queen, it's the like first chipping away at the whole monarchy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it'll be very hard for Charles to command this kind of fawning admiration after the Queen's gone.
Yeah.
I did want to like note, you know, this is not very significant, but just there's a bit that was particularly nasty about Meghan and Harry that I thought was kind of an interesting narrative reframing, where the piece says, the Sussex's departure has helped to strengthen the bond between the 3 generations of monarchy, who were described as acting in lockstep on major decisions like the Duke of York stepping back from royal life and Harry and Meghan being stripped of their Sussex royal branding, as if those are equivalents.
I know. I mean, people like Camilla Tominey love to compare these two situations as though they're in any way similar.
But it really seemed to me like a very clear attempt to repackage the impact of what you and I would see as the devastating loss of Harry and Meghan on the monarchy by suggesting that rather than it weakening the monarchy, them leaving has actually made the monarchy way stronger and brought the rest of them together in their like shoving out of Harry and Meghan, essentially. Like, as well as that, I thought it was interesting that this piece came out on Thursday, I think, and there was no mention anywhere of the monarchy's silence around Black Lives Matter and the fact that it looks particularly weak when they have the member that they lost, Meghan, speaking out so powerfully about it and how much they are missing her voice.
Absolutely. Totally agree. They've like shot themselves in the foot and now seem to be saying that foot is stronger than ever. The piece finishes by saying, "The Queen knows better than anyone that the monarchy has not survived for 1,000 years without turning challenges into opportunities."
To me, it would seem racism is as much of a crisis as coronavirus, and surely that's another challenge that the Queen should be up for confronting and turning into an opportunity of some kind for the monarchy. But still, you know, with all of them out on Sky News, on the Sunday Times, wherever they're doing Zooms, doing fuckloads of Zooms, none of them could be bothered to say the words Black Lives Matter, which, you know, its basic interpretation is that they don't think Black Lives matter and that Black lives do not matter to them. And that's why they're staying silent about it.
Which, I mean, when you think about who these people are, it's not shocking, but it is surprising that they don't take it as like at least like some kind of PR exercise.
Especially when you have Nazi protesters weaponizing God Save the Queen in their riots.
Yeah.
But we also have another Black Lives Matter related story this week that isn't like directly related to the royal family, but we still thought it was appropriate to talk about here. A lot of you messaged us about it, and a lot of royal watchers were talking about it. We're obviously talking about this story about Jessica Mulroney, or Mulrooney, who is frequently described as Meghan's best friend. Like, that's her job title. And she is reportedly godmother to Archie. She is like basically the closest thing Meghan has to a sister by all accounts, and she really blew it this week in bullying a Canadian lifestyle blogger called Sasha Exeter, who posted an 11-minute video this week on Instagram that was called My Amy Cooper Experience, referring to that horrible woman who threatened that black man in Central Park a few weeks ago. And in the video, Sasha calls out Jessica for using her white privilege to threaten her livelihood.
So Sasha is a black influencer, and she shared like a fairly innocuous post on her Instagram stories earlier in that week, encouraging social media influencers to use their platform to support the Black Lives Matter movement.
And as she was doing this, if you follow Jessica, you might have noticed that she has been posting a lot about her work, in particular her TV work, but hadn't publicly said anything about Black Lives Matter at that stage when Sasha shared her post. And for some reason, even though Sasha wasn't personally calling out anybody, Jessica allegedly took this as a personal attack on her. And Sasha says,
"What happened next was a series of very problematic behavior and antics that ultimately resulted in her sending me a threat in writing last Wednesday, June the 3rd. Listen, I'm by no means calling Jess a racist, but what I will say is this. She is very well aware of her wealth, her perceived power, and privilege because of the color of her skin. And that, my friends, gave her the momentary confidence to come for my livelihood in writing."
So Sasha says that Jessica sent her a private message on Instagram saying Black Lives Matter is not a cause she wanted to share, and that she was afraid she'd be bullied or vilified by the public or the media if she did. And also, and this was particularly like tone deaf, promoting her show matters too.
I mean, just the idea that, you know, she's saying she worried she'd be bullied or vilified after seeing Meghan doing that speech where she worried about being picked apart. Like, if Meghan, a black woman, can speak about it, then you, a white woman, can talk about it, no problem. That's the least you should be doing right now. It quickly escalated from there, and Sasha says that Jessica told her in a private message, "I have also spoken to companies and people about the way you have treated me unfairly. You think your voice matters. Well, it only matters if you express it with kindness and without shaming people who are simply trying to learn. Good luck." And then blocked her.
Showing how much clearly she's learnt.
It's insane to say your voice only matters if you express it with kindness. I mean, A, tone policing.
Yeah.
Like, B, shut the fuck up. Like, just insane of her to say anything like that. And Then Sasha says,
during the span of about a week or so, Jessica basically ticked every single box of what a white woman should absolutely not do during the biggest racial uproar in history. For her to threaten me, a single mom, a single black mom, during a racial pandemic, blows my mind. It's absolutely unbelievable.
which it is.
Yeah.
Clearly, Jessica realised she had fucked up, and Sasha says that Jessica attempted to backpedal and send her a load of text trying to explain her behaviour. But as Sasha says,
how can you be about the black people and be a supporter and about female empowerment on the outside when you're attempting to silence a black woman during this movement behind closed doors?
She also referred to Meghan, though not by name, and described her as Jessica's best friend, who is arguably one of the most famous black women in the world.
So after this 11-minute Instagram TV video dropped, Jessica commented on it. It seems like, well, we can't find it anymore, so she might have deleted it. But what she wrote was, "You are right when you say this shit needs to stop. As leaders, we need to join hands and call out wrongs. I know we have different experiences, and that is something that, even in the course of a heated argument, I need to acknowledge and understand. I am unequivocally sorry for not doing that with you and for any hurt I caused. As I told you privately, I have lived a very public and personal experience with my closest friend where race was front and centre. It was deeply educational. I learned a lot from that. I promise to continue and learn and listen on how I can use my privilege to elevate and support black voices." There's so much here, Jesus fucking Christ.
This is a terrible apology.
So bad.
And I cannot believe that she brought Meghan into it.
I know.
I mean, that is very clearly who she's talking about when she says her very public and personal experience with her closest friend where race was front and centre. This is Jessica saying, I'm not a racist, I have a black friend, using Meghan as a fucking shield to prevent criticism of her.
And just the kind of ignorance of this, the privilege to be able to say, it was deeply educational, where, like, you know, we, members of the public who don't know Meghan, have seen how powerfully emotional she felt about her treatment, and clearly the kind of like a totally unfair strain and stress all of that was putting on her. And for her friend to say, like, it was educational, to me is like, you can't even say, like, it was upsetting, it was like eye-opening. Like, use a different word. Educational is so bland and so, like, also plainly not true because of the way she's handling this.
And also, you know, we know from Meghan's past actions how much she values discretion, and you can imagine she would not be pleased to have her friend mentioning her, because as everyone knows, any reference to Meghan is going to draw a much wider audience, media attention, tabloid media attention. That's probably the last fucking thing Meghan wants right now. And even worse, okay, this apology was bad. This apology, it turns out, doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
Because then Jessica allegedly sends Sasha a direct message immediately saying liable suit, presumably she means libel suit, good luck. So nasty.
It's not only two-faced, but yeah, like you said, it's nasty. This is some nasty shit.
She is proving herself to be a very nasty piece of work and a total mean girl.
Yeah.
Sasha then shared a screenshot of this DM on Instagram stories, which I guess was the prompt for Jessica to post a long apology to her own account, which she said was from her heart.
She said, "As some of you may have seen, Sasha Exeter and I had a disagreement. She rightfully called me out for not doing enough when it came to engaging in the important and difficult conversation around race and injustice in our society. I took it personally, and that was wrong. I know I need to do better. Those of us with a platform must use it to speak out."
She also then offered to let Sasha take over her Instagram account to tell her story, and said Jessica will be stepping back from social media to hand her account over to Black Voices. It just seems to me like she's only apologising because she got caught.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I think another thing to note is that, like, we only know who Jessica is because of Meghan, but that in Canada she is a much bigger deal. Her husband is the son of a former prime minister and is himself a very popular TV host in Canada. Jessica has been described as the Gwyneth Paltrow of Toronto and is a very prominent stylist. She has dressed Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, Justin's wife, and she appears as a fashion expert in America on Good Morning America and Cityline, as well as hosting her own bridal reality show, I Do Redo, which was on CTV and was due to air on Netflix, but now CTV has pulled the show from broadcast, and Cityline and Good Morning America have also cut ties with her. And I mean, this
begs
just
the
makes
question.
Yeah, will Meghan do the same?
I do think that Meghan probably has quite a small and close circle of friends, and I think it would be a big step for her to lose someone. So maybe she would want to try and talk this out with Jessica. But at the same time, I really feel like Jessica's actions have really left no going back.
I also wonder about her lack of discretion.
Yeah.
And if you were to cut someone off, what she might say.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
I do think, like, we saw some royal watchers saying that they hoped Meghan would talk to her friend about where she went wrong. But, I mean, it is absolutely not Meghan's job or any other black person's job to educate Jessica on any of this. That is up to Jessica and Jessica alone, and leave Meghan out of it. The bit that's most problematic for our purposes as a royal podcast is that she cited Meghan in her initial apology, which I thought was a particularly unpleasant touch, and one that I would imagine would give Meghan even more pause than this whole incident already would. We saw another of Jessica's friends, a fellow host on Cityline called Tracy Moore, posted on Instagram an image with a text reading "Trust Black Women" and then quite a long caption, part of which says, "Here's what I know. Jessica Mulroney used her extreme privilege to potentially bury a black sister. Sasha Exeter took a brave step telling her story. Believe black women. I mentioned in a prior post that this isn't going to be an easy time. Friends and family members will show true colours and the unlearning opportunities will be huge. Jess has seen this caption, I don't like to ambush, and knows how I feel. Let's unlearn lashing out at black women as a legitimate response to feeling called out. Unlearn privilege as a shield for your white fragility and use it instead to protect those who need it." And she does talk a little bit about her personal relationship with Jessica. Like, she says, "Jess has sat on the phone as I bawled, coaxing me, soothing me, lifting me up. And that's what makes this so hard. I am a friend. I'm also a black woman. The emotional labour often falls on our backs to speak up, push through and fight hard. The price for both staying silent or speaking up, immense. Cue the extreme exhaustion. Next steps, check your privilege often, not just in public posts, in your daily life, in your workplace, at school, in the boardroom. It's the only way we get to the next step." Which I thought was like a really strong post. Like, she doesn't hold back. She acknowledges the very difficult position that she's in being a close friend of this person who has really fucked up. And I think that that's like a very useful thing to keep in mind if you are someone whose friend has fucked up like this, that I would, you know, in my own like imagination, could envision Meghan having a similar response to this.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me as well.
But on a lighter note, I wanted to talk about my quote of the week. I don't know if our listeners will know who Kerry Katona is, but she is an icon. She was in the pop band Atomic Kitten. She's also a big reality star. She has done tons of reality shows.
She's done them all.
And now she
did adverts for Iceland that were very big.
Excuse me, love. Have these breasts been enlarged?
I wouldn't like to say, madam.
She now does a column in the magazine called New Magazine. And I just loved in it this week, she wrote, "As for the going back to school situation, until I see Prince George and Princess Charlotte back in the classroom, I'm not sending mine. I won't be used as some guinea pig."
And she's 100% right.
Yeah, right on, Kerry Katona.
Totally agree with Kerry here.
This is a great response to have to any government move, really.
Yeah.
If it's not good enough for the royals, it's not good enough for me. Why should I be putting my kids at risk? What about Fit for a Queen, Tom?
I think I'll probably have to go for the Queen's birthday suit.
Did you have to say that?
So I'm of course talking about what she wore to trooping on her unbirthday, which was a sort of coordinated coat and dress set. It was like a pale blue coat with pearl buttons, and the dress was floral, and she had a matching hat.
Yeah, the dress was by her dressmaker, Stuart Parvin, and the hat was Rachel Trevor Morgan. We've actually seen her wear this outfit 3 times. Well, this is her 3rd time wearing it. She also wore it when the Trumps visited, and then at the state opening of Parliament in December. So obviously that was a conscious choice that she didn't want to be wearing something brand new and flashy.
Yeah.
Because usually trooping would be like a big celebration, and like the fashion is such a big part of it, especially with like Kate and Meghan and stuff. But this was a more frugal choice.
Yeah. And it came with gloves as well, so that was handy for the times that we're in. She accessorized with a platinum and diamond brooch in the shape of a leek, which I really liked because I like leeks. But it's specifically the symbol that's found on the Welsh Guards cap badge, and the Welsh Guards are the guys and girls who were parading around for her.
It's also a national emblem of Wales. It was all pretty, like, muted for the Queen. Like, when we saw her last year, she was wearing yellow, right?
Yeah, well, I think she's taking advantage of the fact that she isn't appearing in front of massive crowds in person, that she doesn't need to be this, like, highlighter beacon.
It was still, like, a nice, colourful outfit, though. And in keeping with the NHS blues and turquoises that we've seen her wear on a number of occasions since lockdown began.
Well, what about first in line?
I think it's got to be the Queen this week, because even with all of the Andrew shit that was going on, that should be mortifying for any family member of his, she has gotten away with all this.
Yeah, the main story for her this week was like, oh, she's going to have a little mini trooping.
Like, everybody was just delighted to see her, you know, even though you had the alt-right singing God Save the Queen later in the day. The only thing people were interested in was, oh, look at the Queen in her little blue hat, smiling in Windsor Castle. Like, nothing sticks to her. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, what is next week going to bring us?
We've got the royals back to work proper.
Oh, yeah.
We are seeing some of them returning to face-to-face duties. Obviously, Princess Anne is the first.
Oh my god, yeah, she'll be like straight out the door.
She is going to visit a barracks on Tuesday. And then Prince Charles and Camilla are heading back to London to receive President Macron of France on Thursday. No Brigitte.
No Brigitte?
As far as I can tell. Just Macron solo.
I am quite excited to see Charles do his namaste again.
I would love to see Camilla and Brigitte hanging out.
In the Wendy house.
They're like the same age. You think Camilla is jealous that Brigitte's got like a hot husband?
I mean, so does Camilla.
Because it wasn't considered very sexy.
Last week we talked a little bit about how Harry and Meghan were meeting privately with community leaders about how they wanted to take a more active and vocal role in the Black Lives Matter movement. And now, according to the Sunday Telegraph, we're going to be hearing a bit more about that in the coming days. So look out for that.
That's very soon. That's great. In a slightly unrelated note, we were thinking of making some Instagram stickers, like little fun GIFs that you can put on Instagram stories. And we really liked all of your suggestions. Things like Not Quite Our Class Darling and the Pizza Express in Woking logo. Like, it would be nice to do one of Meghan saying thrive, not survive. But if you guys have any ideas, like, let us know. Send them over.
Yeah, you can contact us on Instagram and Twitter at airheadspod, or on Facebook at airheads, or you can email us airheadspod@gmail.com.
If it's a very complex idea for a GIF, we would love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review. You can tell us more about your sticker ideas there if you like, and tell a friend.
And we hope you have a good week and take care of yourselves and stay safe. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
God save the Queen, the fascist regime.